Welcome to the Good Ride. This is a review of the Burton Kilroy Pow Camber. We're doing it here at the desk because I've reviewed this on snow with the boys, Zobel, Jimbo, Peter, at a demo, but then got some more time on it late summer at Mount Hood. We rode this with Burton Malavita ESTs, and we rode this with Union Contact Pros, or basically Super Pros, a version of Contact Pros. We got on this in a few different conditions. First off, we got some kind of hard snow with some soft snow on top, but really hard to really set an edge except for a few soft patches. Then I got this late summer at Mount Hood in Oregon, and had some really soft, perfectly groomed, just a little thin patch of good snow, and this board just like came alive there in the softer snow. When I started geeking on the specs, I noticed something really interesting. This has the exact same sizes and specs of the old Burton stun gun that came and left too soon, in my opinion. We were just starting to get warmed up to it. Tim owns one, our web developer and fellow snowboard gear reviewer here on the site. And every time I rode it, it just kept getting more and more fun, and we really liked it. We rode that one in powder, and I realized this is just basically a lower cost version of that board. Yeah, the base isn't quite as fast and the core isn't quite as dynamic, but overall it's still very much the same ride, and I think that's why this appeals to me. Other than edge hold, it's pretty much an amazing board for this price point. Get this board if you want a board that's right there, like as good or almost as good as most dedicated powder boards, but then you still want to go out and get that more directional, powerful, off the back foot kind of carve. I like this board so much, I used my hard-earned Good Ride dollars to buy this thing because it's just such a fun, recommendable, alternative free ride board for this price point. There aren't many boards out there like that. When it comes to sizing, the Kilroy Pow here in a 55 works perfectly for me. I've ridden the 50 in the stun gun and the 58 in a stun gun, and just the 55 in the Kilroy Pow. The 50 in the stun gun, which is the same exact specs, was just a little too small. The 58 felt a little too big. It was better for Tim and his taller specs. And this 55 just felt just right. Even with my size 9 boots, Peter felt the same. Jimbo and Zobel didn't have toe drag. They were pretty stoked on it too. I think it works kind of 11 and under. I would keep it at that, and be careful as you get closer to 11. You want to make sure your boot footprint is more in line with Burton or Adidas or other good brands out there, so you eliminate toe and heel drag as much as possible, especially if you carve hard. This is a directional camber. It says on the site just camber, but when I got this board, it says directional camber on the sticker on the board. And when I laid it down on the table, you could see that early rise. So it has that same directional camber that the stun gun does, and all the family tree boards, mainly all the family tree boards do as well. That makes it feel kind of locked in. It's not an entry-level board. It's not for beginner or intermediates. It's an advanced expert board at a lower cost. Not easy to skid turns, but tracks really well and one foots really well, and just has a great kind of off the tail feel. There's so much nose and so little tail and a lot of setbacks, so it really feels like you're sitting towards the back of the board. For some who like a more centered ride, you won't like that, but if you like a more set back kind of surfy ride, because when you surf you're standing on the tail, this will work for you. As far as flex goes, it's got a pretty medium stiff flex from the tail all the way through to about here, and then lots of give in the nose. So the nose is really easy to play around with. If you want to do tripods and such, it works very easy. The tail took us all a little extra work to butter, but it's very doable. It just doesn't give as easy as the nose. And it's got that legendary Burton pop. Burton just understands pop better than almost any other brand I've ever dealt with. That's just one of the things. Everybody has their own way that they shine, but Burton has this feeling where they still have a dampness feel that doesn't feel too rubbery, and they have this really poppy feel where there's lots of energy in return, but it doesn't feel too snappy and light. So it's just this nice balance between both that I really like. It's very easy to create your own air with this board, and that's what we love about it. They just do a great job at that. When it comes to speed, Burton's bases are all really fast. This is a centered bass, but it's not like their high-end centered bass. So for $449, that's a pretty good deal, and I'm okay with it. It had good glide. Yeah, some of the family tree boards I've owned in the past, like the Burton Flight Attendant, or that was family tree, now it's not, or the Hometown Hero, and those basses are a little faster, but hey, not bad for this price point. The nose, that big old nose that floats so well in powder, has a lot of chatter, but as you get to about where the camber starts and where the board starts to really stiffen up, it just quiets down and it has a nice damp ride underfoot. It's not quite a bomber because of that nose, but it's pretty good for being so far back and just kind of the style that it is. It's not bad at all for speed. When dealing with uneven terrain, it can, Burton just does a great job, either with my, Union Contact Pros or the Malavita EST. It just felt damp. It felt really damp underfoot and absorbed all this like micro bumpy snow we got on a hard day and soft, just fucked up uneven snow I got in a patch on the way down the hill. It can really absorb that chatter and chunder underfoot, and it does a great job for that. One of the problems with this board is the grip just isn't quite there with a lot of other boards out there that have a disrupted side cut. That'd be the one like part where I'm like, if you see hard conditions a lot, you'll probably want to pass on this and maybe get something with a more disrupted side cut. You really have to be an accomplished rider, and you really have to understand how to manipulate your edges so they give you more grip in harder snow. And that's not an easy thing to do, and it's not an easy thing to do all the time. So if you're like me and you come into an unexpected hard patch and you still want grip, this might not be the one for you. But this is the board I love in good conditions, from like medium snow to soft snow and powder. That's where I love this the most. It can hold okay in hard snow, but you really have to dial back your turns. Speaking of turns, this is pretty quick edge to edge for its width. I think it's just because of that narrower tail going into kind of like a mid-wide waist and, an even wider nose. That really works well for my size 9 boots. It's not super fast. It was kind of like medium, bordering on medium fast. Very controllable, very doable. I do know that in powder on the stun gun, same shape again, it turns faster because the whole top is floating and you're kind of turning more off the back of the board, and it just turned really fast to the trees and everything like that. So I would say in powder it would probably get to medium fast, especially because it's almost the exact same specs as the stun gun. Now when really laying into a carve, man, this thing is fun. If you get it in medium to medium soft snow and you can really lay that edge down, just that camber underfoot really engages into that turn and springs you out, and you can really put a lot of back foot weight on this board. One thing though, there's a lot of taper with this board, but I realized it doesn't feel as tapered as you would think for that. And I think, Burton does some cool things with their side cuts to make it feel less tapered than it is on groomers. So the back doesn't wash as much, but then in powder, rides the same as most boards that feel that tapered on snow. So that's really cool. Now powder, this thing floats like a champ. We've ridden this stun gun, the stun gun in powder, and this is the same as the stun gun. You hear that over and over again. Yes, the base isn't going to glide as fast as the old stun gun or other family tree boards, but it's still like upper middle, really well done. And it's got good base glide, but really when you set this thing all the way back, you get really good directional float, and you have a huge nose, a long, wide nose with some early rise, and then, you know, camber underfoot down to a small tapered tail with almost like, with minimal surface area. So this thing just floats like a champ. I loved riding the stun gun in powder with Tim when I borrowed it from him, and it was just really fun. This is just the kind of board you want in powder, and for this price point, it's hard to do much better, especially when you can take this out and just carve up groomers the next day when the powder's gone. Getting air, I would say you're so far back on the tail, it does feel kind of weird with that big nose and tail, but it's very doable, especially if you bring it more up on the board. If you set your stance forward more, it can do a little better with air, and there's so much float in the nose, maybe you can get away with that on a powder day so you can get more air. But where this really shines overall is just for those who like to sit kind of more on the back seat of the board and just carve and ride powder, and it works in just about every condition except for medium hard, snow on down. It's one hell of a board for this price point, and it's strongly recommended. It's such a good board that I bought one.